thanks for joining me on another episode with the worms. This episode's a little different as I'm finally harvesting one of my bins. This is the Vermibag tote that last week I said I was going to harvest. And unlike any time before, I do pay attention to where the worms are because I don't want the worms to be in this bin as it's not going to have any food inside of this bin. I do try to stay organized in that the tray, if you look down in the bottom right hand corner, the tray has a number 4 on it, and this bin is my number 4 bin. That way I know if I'm doing multiple bins to put the same worms back into the same bin or Vermibag. That way I don't mix them up. When I do my worms, I like to bait them out. So this tray has holes soldered into all sides and the bottom. And then I put things that the worms like melons and bananas in there. I used to cover the top with the castings, but I've lost a lot of castings that way because I dump this out more frequently than I do a regular bin. But once I cover it with the cardboard, I cover this with bubble wrap to keep the moisture in, and then I mix up my bedding, and I do have another video where I show how I mix up my bedding. If you want to click on the link, you can see it more in depth. But I mix up my bedding in here, and it's cocoa core and cardboard with some of the worm grit. I don't put any other items in there at this point right now, especially not food, because as I dump the bait trays still have plenty of food, so the worms will get fed. But initially I don't put any food in there. Always remember, don't inhale the dust, or try not to inhale the dust if you have eggshells, because it can be harmful to your lungs. But I give it a good mix, and then I fill the empty Vermibag tote or regular tote about halfway. And this is because, again, the cardboard that is going to be from the bait trays gets dumped over into this week to week. Once I'm satisfied with the level of content in the tote, I'll just close this up and it'll sit for about a week until I dump the first set of worms back in from the bait trays. I have to apologize for the loss of footage for the harvesting of the Vermibag Mini. Unfortunately, I thought I was recording and I wasn't recording. But the hardest thing about harvesting the Vermibag Mini is getting down on the floor to get the castings. So if you have a bad back or bad knees, this is not going to be the type of system for you, because you do have to get down there and unzip the bottom and remove the castings from the bottom. If you have someone who can help you with it, great, but that's really the major drawback of harvesting the flow-through systems from the bottom. The castings on the Vermibag Mini were very wet and clumpy, and I'm going to have to dry these out for longer than I'll have to dry out the ones from the Vermibag tote. It's not always like that, but in this particular instance, these were wet, and it might be due to me adding the additional liquid in the previous week. But I'm putting a bait tray in here, just like I did for the Vermibag Mini, but it's a smaller bait tray because I have a smaller amount of castings, and because I don't really feel like there's worms in here, because I didn't see any worms as the castings were coming out. So I'm not going to put too much in here at this point, but I fill it up the same with the cardboard over the top. And since these are wet, I'm going to cover this with the screen instead of the bubble wrap to encourage air circulation throughout and make sure that it evaporates. And unlike the other tote bins where they basically get a week worth of rest, the flow-through system does have to be filled up again and fed as normal. It does not get a break like the other systems do. So I'm going to wet the top down because this was still the top from before and it's dry. But I'm going to do a layer of cardboard, then the food, then another layer of cardboard. And this is to help start getting the material back up, because as you can see, it is much lower than the levels that I had it before the harvest. So I don't want to try and get the level up to what it was immediately. Weekly, I'll do levels of cardboard and food until it's at the height that I like. But I do want to get any worms that are now lower in the bin to migrate back up. And once I have fed it up and given it the 2 levels of cardboard, it is set up for the week. And I won't check on this bin again until the next feeding next week. As far as the castings that I harvested, they just go into the pizza dough trays underneath where I keep my bins. And I check them about every 5 or 6 days versus a full week to make sure that there's still food attracting the worms so that I can harvest. And that concludes the mini harvest update on the 2 bins. I do hope you've enjoyed the content. Thanks for watching.